Good morning and welcome to your third and final training session for the Critical Friends Network. For those of you who are just a bit of a recap essentially on who we are, I think you know, my name's Zoe, I'm the Health Promotion Coordinator at Women's Health in the South East, and been an absolute pleasure to work together with Lizzie Fox, Christy Lang and Karpel Dang, who are basically make up the best part of the key staff in our regions for the Respectful Relationships Initiative. So welcome back to your third and final training. This session is going to be a very skill-based interactive session, so looking forward to working with you all this morning. As always, I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to pay my respects to Aboriginal people here in the room today. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people and of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge those with lived experience of family violence and pay my respects to women and children who are disproportionately affected by family violence. I'd like to in particular make note of those who have sadly lost their lives at the hands of a family member or an intimate partner. So as I mentioned previously before, today's session will be about practical skills. It's about what you need to be a critical friend. So we won't be specifically talking about family violence today, but of course it's very important to note that there may be some content that might trigger you, and if you do feel that you would benefit in any way in getting some help or chatting to someone, please do. So of course, on the left there, we've got 1-800-RESPECT, which is our national sexual assault counselling service. In the middle there, Safe Steps, so crisis support. And on the right, No to Violence. So that's for male victims of family violence, as well as those men who may be concerned about their own behaviour. If you do feel uncomfortable or unsafe at any point during today's session, we do encourage you to take a break and take some time out, and you are under absolutely no obligation to remain in the session. Okay, so in the last session, we took a real deep dive into what is respectful relationships. We looked at the 5-step improvement cycle and the whole school approach. We also spoke about the Critical Friends Network, the Critical Friends model, and the attributes of becoming a critical friend and the skills. We talked also, we started to talk about the process of engaging with schools. And this was all set on the basis of the foundational knowledge that we hope you gained in the first session, which was around gender equality and how that is rooted in the cause of family violence. So today's session is focusing on providing you with the knowledge and practice and tools that you need to be a successful critical friend. So let's get straight amongst it and get going with an activity. We're going to head off into breakout rooms now. And this is your chance to have a bit of a reflect on what you learnt in the second session last week. So when you do go into your breakout room, you're going to get a chance to share 2 things that you remember from the last session. You'll have about 5 minutes to discuss in your group, and then we'll get a 60-second countdown before you're pulled back into the main session. And your facilitator will have asked for 1 volunteer to share with the main group and feedback. So, Lizzie, if you are ready, we will start to head off into our rooms. Thanks, everyone. See you in there.
Okay, how are we going? Everyone back? So hopefully you were able to have a little bit of a discussion and rejig the memory and everything's sort of flooding back to you now, but I'll just give a very brief overview of the main points that we want to remember today, because we're going to be moving on and looking at them at a little bit more detail. So you might recall this very boring model, that's our 5-step improvement cycle. So it's those steps that schools take to implement the whole school approach, that colourful wheel that a lot of you remembered, especially in my group. So that committing to action, getting our RR team together, assessing where you're at, so using that baseline assessment, planning and implementing, so creating an action plan, evaluating and monitoring, so redoing our staff surveys or checking in on attitudes, and then reviewing and reflecting progress, so looking back on our baseline assessment, action plan, and planning for the next sort of step forward. You might also have remembered the baseline assessment. So not many people in my group mentioned this, but this is the document we're going to be working through and working with today. So the baseline assessment is broken up into the 6 wedges of the whole school approach, and it consists of about 40 statements. And you should have received an email before this session with the copy of the baseline assessment in it, with the third column, the what column, filled with lots of different implementation strategy examples. The other document we're looking at today, and we're going to look at in a moment, is the action plan. So it's basically the same structure as the baseline assessment, but it's in one A3 page, so that schools can prioritise which baseline assessment statements they want to work on, and then create a more detailed plan in how they're going to achieve that. And the last thing that we're going to be talking about today, because this is the main focus of the action of today, is the critical friend meeting. So what do we do in the critical friend meeting, and how do we go about it? So we talked about helping a school go through the baseline assessment, brainstorming possible strategies for their action plan and deciding on which strategies should be the priority, giving feedback on the quality of the action plan, and helping understanding data from surveys. So the first activity that we're going to do today is going to focus on brainstorming possible strategies for the action plan and deciding on priorities. So that quiz that we did last week is going to come in handy here, because we're going to be talking a lot about what priorities or what actions that schools can take. And we've had a lot of practical examples last session, but now this is your chance to have a bit of a go at brainstorming and getting those creative juices flowing. I think that the hardest part of implementing respectful relationships is that there are no boundaries or rules, and that schools can implement in 1,000 different ways. So this is sometimes paralyzing because it's like our paradox of choice. The more choices we have, the harder it is to decide on a course of action. So what I've just done is kind of put together a little pictorial spread of different implementation strategies that schools across Southern Melbourne have chosen to implement respectful relationships. So this is Cranbourne Secondary's Child Safe Code of Conduct. On entry to the school, every visitor reads through and signs and agrees to this Code of Conduct, and they've added a statement of commitment to gender equality in their Code of Conduct. This is from Dandenong High School. They did a gender audit of their student participation in senior STEM subjects. So as you can see from this slide, in Year 10 robotics, out of 25 kids in that class, 0 are girls. In Year 11 systems engineering, there is 1 girl, but she's obviously dropped off in Year 12 systems engineering. So we can see that even at Year 9, the optional STEM subject, we've only got 24 out of 80 students female. And so what Dandenong High School did was they rejigged their staff allocation. They got more female science teachers at younger year levels to show, to role model them. And they also did a bit of a special promotion of their Year 9 STEM program to try and encourage girls to take up more STEM. This was last year, so hopefully we'll see a change in the numbers this year. I haven't seen the new class makeup this year. This is an activity from Cardinia Primary School's Family and Friends Day. So they had over 250 parents attend, and they completed an RR on South Peter 12's College website. So they have a special page around respectful relationships, and they also regularly share family violence awareness campaigns and gender equality messages across their social media. You don't need to read what's on this picture, but this is just an example of a curriculum document that aligns respectful relationships with other social and emotional learning work done by the school. It's just a really great example that RR isn't an extra that's tacked on or an extra chore to do. It's actually relevant and complements other work being done by schools already. This is a disclosures decision-making tree tool that was created by Lyndhurst Secondary College's wellbeing team, and they printed each of those tools in every single teacher diary and provided PD or in-house PD on how to make decisions around disclosures. This is just Lynbrook Primary School promoting their respectful relationships work in their local paper. This is Keysborough South Primary School. They built an RR bookshelf in their staff room for books that promote equality and challenge gender stereotypes. This is Berwick Secondary College. Lucky White Ribbon got saved because otherwise they would have had to change their mural, but this is a mural that they created with some of their students for White Ribbon Day. And this is actually a school in Hume in the northern suburbs. They designed and purchased lanyards and pins for all of their staff to wear that promote their school as leaders in RR. So you might see that the lanyard says the best relationships are respectful ones. They also have a respect women pin and a leading RR pin. And the green pin at the top promotes their school's values. So, now we're going to go back into our breakout rooms and start the first real activity, get those creative juices flowing. So you're going to go into your breakout room and your facilitator of that room is going to have one of these 4 statements. Now, these statements have been copied directly from the baseline assessment document. So you can see that 4.2, 5.2, 2.5 and 1.4. So for example, 4.2 has come from wedge 4. The teaching and learning wedge, and it's the second statement. So that's just what those numbers mean. So you're going to each go into your rooms, and as a group, you're going to brainstorm possible strategies to meet this baseline assessment statement. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and put you all in your breakout rooms. Okay, it looks like we've got everyone back in the room. Okay, so hopefully you got a chance to have a bit of a brainstorm and talk about what maybe a baseline assessment statement means. That sometimes they're really long and broad and convoluted, as you can see from some of the statements up there. And it's really great to give schools an opportunity to break it down and to understand what it might mean for them, and then have a bit of a creative brainstorming session and get those juices flowing. We're going to move on to the next activity, and I'm so glad that lots of people in the first breakout room mentioned how great the quiz was, because our quiz guru, Carpel, is back for another quiz. Take it away, Carpel. I know you're all excited. I can see how excited you all are.
Okay, hey team, I have been dubbed the quiz guru, so time for a bit of fun again. So we have quiz time. So this is on boundaries and roles today. So get out your pens and papers and let's get started, I think. So
this is a true or false quiz. So
yes.
This is sort of big writing to come. And this is just kind of the purpose is just to sort of have an understanding of where the critical friend role ends. It's kind of testing your knowledge from the last session, just so that we as critical friends aren't asking too much of the schools, but the schools also aren't asking too much of us as critical friends as well. So sort of knowing where we can set our boundaries as well. Do you want the first one up, Carpel?
Appreciate that. Yes. Let's get the first one up. So true or false? it is the school's responsibility to reach out to their critical friends and organise a critical friend meeting. So true or false? Number 2, critical friends should draw up an action plan for a school if they are asked. Okay, everyone's good. Number 3, critical friends conduct a follow-up phone call within 2 weeks of a critical friends meeting. Number 4, if a school is being unresponsive, the critical friend should keep trying. They will get through eventually. True or false? Number 5, if a school is resistant or unresponsive, the school should contact the principal.
That should be the critical friend should contact the principal.
Oh, sorry, thanks for that.
That's
The
okay.
critical friend should contact the principal. And number 7, schools can ask their critical friend for additional support. And lastly, number 7, critical friends can contact the Respect Relationships regional team, which is us, Lizzie, Christy, and I, and Tanara, at any point during their work with schools. Okay, how do we all go? Adding up the scores. So the school's responsibility to reach out to their critical friend and organise a critical friend meeting. True. So, we'll have our schools reach out to the critical friends to organise that meeting, and that's the process we'll follow. And if there's any issues with that, us as a regional team will help follow that up. So critical friends should draw up an action plan for schools if they're asked. False. So you're there to support schools. They need to be doing the work, and you might have some schools that might try to handball responsibilities they have to critical friends. You're there to support and guide them along the journey and be part of that, but not do the work for them is the main point of that statement. So critical friends conduct a follow-up phone call within 2 weeks of critical friend meeting. True. So that's the process and guideline that we'll have in place. So with the follow-up phone call. Number 4, if a school is being unresponsive, the critical friend should keep trying. They'll get through eventually. So with this one, false. So, you'll work with schools that are differing in the way they approach things, but we're there to support you to reach out to schools if there are some communication issues. So definitely, if there's been some communication issues, definitely Lizzie, Christy, and I are there to support that. If a school is resistant or unresponsive, the critical friend should contact the principal. So false. Contact us. Have a chat to us instead. Principals, have 101 things on their plate, and yeah, definitely the first port of call is if you have an unresponsive school contact person is to have a chat to us, and we'll have some strategies, and hopefully we can reach out for you as well. Number 6, schools can ask their critical friend for additional support. So that's true. We're not. We want the strengths and some of the skills and strengths from our critical friend network to be able to support schools in various ways, and you'll have the contacts and skill base and knowledge base there to support the school. So we don't want you to do the work for them, but we do. We do see the importance, hence why we're doing this work, of the critical friend to the school. Definitely that community sector support.
And I think it's really important to
Yes.
recognise as well that schools can ask for the additional support, but it's okay for the critical friend to say, no, I don't have capacity for that. So if that's the case, you're more than welcome to refer them back to us, and we'll work out how to support them further.
Great. And thanks, Lizzie. And lastly, critical friends contact the regional team at any point. I think I've been through this earlier with some of the other statements, but true. Feel free to contact us at any stage if you're having some issues, if you want clarification, if you're uncertain about something. We're there to support as well, because we're all in this together to support our schools and students and teachers. So I think tally up your score, and I hope, and the winner, what does the winner get? The glory of getting the most right. So I hope.
Weren't you
the
buying them a
quiz
bottle
guru.
of wine, Capel?
Pardon?
Weren't you going to buy them a bottle of wine? Wasn't
I-
that clear?
I don't think I'm allowed to do that, but no. Look, the quiz guru will handball it back to Lizzie for the next segment. But thank you.
Looks like lots of people are writing 7 out of 7. Yay.
Oh yes, yes,
Hey.
definitely whack your score in the chat room.
If you didn't get 7, it's okay. You can put it in there. Thank you, Lauren. Well done. Thank you for admitting.
Oh,
to
great
your
work,
mistakes.
team.
Do better next time. My gosh. Alrighty. So we are about half an hour away from our first break. So one thing that we didn't mention at the start of the session is that we're taking quite a big break this morning. So we're going to have 1 hour break from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. And the reason we're doing that is 3 hours in front of a screen. I don't know about you, but it's really hard. I am exhausted after a full day of Skype meetings. It's really, really tiring work. So please, we encourage you to use that hour to go for a walk, get outside. It's raining at the moment, but get outside in some fresh air anyway. Yeah, you use that time to sort of refresh and recharge so that you're ready to handle that, the 1.5 hours that we will do after the break. But before we do that, just hold on a little bit longer and we'll get through all of this boring data stuff. So the next thing we're going to talk about today is talking about the data that's available to schools. We're not going to do an activity about that, just in terms of the interest of time and being able to give you enough time to really unpack the other 3 functions of the critical friend meeting. And the reason for choosing this as the thing that we don't do an activity on is because doing a staff and student attitude survey is an optional step for schools. So not all schools will be doing this, and this might be, I guess, your most or your least likely function of the critical friend meeting. So I'm just going to talk through the different surveys that are available to schools, and then I'd like to just have a quick chat using the chat function about your knowledge and what you think schools might, what kind of data schools might have available to them in addition to the staff and student attitude surveys. So when the pilot happened in 2015, it was Our Watch that conducted the pilot, and they did pre and post surveys with both staff and secondary school students. The staff survey from the Our Watch pilot was called a school culture survey. So you can see in this slide, there's a picture of the Respectful Relationships Education in Schools final evaluation report. That was Our Watch's evaluation report of the pilot, and that's freely available on their website if you're super nerdy and want to have a look at that evaluation. So the school culture survey that they did with the staff was asking questions around staff's perceptions of the school as a workplace in terms of gender equality. So for example, it might ask whether male or female staff are more likely to support sporting activities at the school, or who's more likely to run the drama club or dance class. Is it male staff? Is it female staff? Who's more likely to clean up the kitchen in the staff room? Is it male staff? Is it female staff? And it also asks a lot of questions around staff's work-life balance. So for example, do they feel supported in undertaking leadership positions? Do they feel like they can have a healthy work-life balance with looking after children, and those sorts of questions? The problem, I guess, with staff surveys in that respect is that education is a really highly feminized workforce. We have 70% of all education staff in Australia are female. And so the data isn't, it's a little bit skewed. It's quite, education staff are quite well supported. Female education staff are quite well supported. And so we don't really get a lot of rich data out of that. However, what we do see is that when we look at just leadership positions in Victoria, and if we expand it across Australia, the same theme happens. Even though we have 70% of the workforce is education, when we just look at leadership positions, 70% of leadership positions are male. So we start to see this like flip when we get into higher level leadership positions in education. So that's the school culture survey. The school culture survey is about staff perceptions of the school as a workplace. When Respect for Relationships got scaled up, ACEL Allen was the independent contractor that was engaged to do the statewide evaluation of Respect for Relationships, and they do an attitude survey of staff and secondary school students. So the ACEL Allen attitude survey is more around staff's individual perceptions or individual attitudes towards gender equality and family violence. So they ask questions such as, do you agree that stopping someone from spending their money is a form of family violence? Or how much do you agree that men should be in control of a relationship? So asking those individual attitude questions. So these tools have slightly different functions and purposes, but we have made them both available to schools to conduct surveys in their own time. So the ACEL Allen survey happens twice a year. We're still waiting on the first one. We'll be waiting forever. That's just typical department fashion. But the surveys that they conduct tend to be around November when schools are really, really busy. And so for the schools that don't have time or aren't able to conduct, to do the survey with ACEL Allen, we've provided them with the tools to do their own survey in their own time. So if a school asks to have a critical friend meeting with the purpose of discussing their survey data results, they should provide the critical friend with their survey results ahead of time, and the meeting will be focused around discussing the results and brainstorming strategies to address or improve the results of the school survey. So the critical friend should have an opportunity to have a look at the data and have a think about the data before the critical friend meeting to prepare. One thing we do encourage schools not to do is alter the questions, because both of the surveys, the Our Watch School Culture Survey and the ACEL Allen Staff and Student Attitude Survey, they're both validated and they're both aligned to the National Community Attitude Surveys, or NCAS. Can I just get everyone in the participant function? If you go into your bar down the bottom of your screen and go into participants, can I get a yes or the green tick if you've heard of NCAS, the National Community Attitude Survey, or a red cross, a no if you haven't? Okay, we've got quite a few people saying no. So I've put in a link in the slide to the NCAS survey, so you can have a look at our National Community Attitude Survey. So NCAS is a survey that is conducted in Australia around every 4 years. It's conducted by ANROS, and it measures our community attitudes towards gender equality and family violence. So we've had our last iteration was in 2017, and I think they released the report in 2018. And they share the findings, and they talk about what are our sort of problematic attitudes and what are our good attitudes. So basically, in a nutshell at the moment, in Australia, most people recognise that physical violence is a form of family violence, and they're not accepting of it. They don't think it's acceptable. There's growing knowledge around other forms of violence, like emotional violence or psychological violence or financial violence as well, but we've still got a little way to go with that. And then in terms of gender equality, we still have quite a way to go. There's a significant proportion of our of people in the country, both men and women, who support ideas that men should be in charge of relationships or the head of the household or make better leaders, or those sorts of attitudes. So after this session, I'd really encourage, if you haven't heard of the NCAS survey, to click on the link in the slides. We'll send you the slides after the presentation, and have a look at where our community's attitudes sit in terms of gender equality and family violence. So our surveys reflect this similar questions and similar statements that we have in the NCAS, and we're able to track those changes over time. So for example, 30, 40 years ago, physical violence was a lot more acceptable. You could, as Sean Connery once said, a slap in the face is sometimes necessary to keep your wife in line. So we can track those changes. We do the same survey every 4 years, so that we can see how our community's attitudes are changing over time, and also where we can focus our attention. So in terms of the surveys, we just really encourage schools to not alter the questions, and also to keep the data desegregated by gender. So a lot of our schools don't want to look at the difference, but what's really interesting when you look at how staff members perceive a workplace organisation is that sometimes women and men perceive their opportunities or their outcomes or their workplace differently, and it's really important that we look at that data desegregated. So I'm going to hand over to Christy to do our last sort of, I guess it's an activity, and have a chat to you about our schools in SMA and BPA.
I'm actually going to attempt to handball this to someone, because I've got a handyman that's just decided to drill into brickwork outside, and my 3-year-old is having the most monumental tantrum in the background. So it might be more peaceful if I could ask Zoe or Lizzie or Carpel to jump onto this. I'm happy to put the link in the chat. Sorry, it's been quiet all morning, and as soon as it's my turn to talk,
all good. Christy's had aeroplanes, people mowing, people doing building works. She's got some problems. So I mentioned before that Respectful Relationships came out in the Royal Commission in 2015, and then the Respectful Relationships Initiative was first funded in 2016. So that was 4 years ago, and what's happened in those 4 years is that there's been 2 cycles or 2 rounds of funding. So therefore we've got 2 groups of RR schools. So in 2017, in southern Melbourne, we had 43 schools. So you can see that our total is 43, but I've just broken them up into Catholic, government and independent schools, because we made this, we offered funding and support to our Catholic and independent schools in Victoria as well. Bayside had just a couple more. They had 113 schools in the first round of funding. In 2018, we were refunded for another 2 years, and in 2019, schools started coming on board and implementing at the end of 2019 and the start of 2020. So in southern Melbourne, we got a total of 57 new schools signing up. 54 of those were government. And in Bayside, they had an additional 24 schools sign up, 15 of whom were government schools. So at the moment, we've got 99 schools in Southern Melbourne doing respectful relationships, and we've got 137 schools in Bayside Peninsula area. And the point to take away from this is that some of those 99 schools have been implementing since 2017, and some of our schools are just starting. In Bayside Peninsula, it's a little bit more different. They have a lot more schools that have been implementing for a lot longer, whereas in Southern Melbourne, we have a lot more brand new schools that are just starting their RR journey. So now what we're going to get everyone to do is to fill out a form to inform us of the number of schools that you've had capacity to work with. So after the last session, we really tried to give you a bit of an idea of what is to be expected. And today we're going to go through the how to do it. But we know that we're going to have an initial phone call. The school's going to call you and book in a meeting time. They might send you their baseline assessment, or they might send you some survey data for you to have a look through to prepare. Then you're going to have a 2 to 3 hour critical friend meeting. And then within 2 weeks after that, you'll conduct a follow-up phone call. There may or may not be ongoing support after that, depending on what your capacity is as a critical friend to continue support. And so you'll do that with each school. So hopefully you'll have a bit of an idea of the amount of time it will take to work with each school, and how much capacity you have and how many schools that you have the capacity to work with. So what I can see Christy has done is in the chat, she's put a link to the Survey Monkey. So if everyone as an individual practitioner could click on that link and go to the Survey Monkey and fill out, I think there's only about 3 or 4 questions. You'll fill out your name and how many schools you can support. And it will also give you the option to list any of your preferred schools that you'd like to work with. So before this session, you got an email that had a list of all of the respectful relationship schools in Southern Melbourne. So if there's any schools on that list that you really would like to work with, we can't guarantee preferences, but you'll have an opportunity to write down the schools that you would really prefer to work with, and also any constraints that you might have. So if you can only work with primary schools, or you can only work in a certain area, or you can only work with an independent school or something like that, you have an opportunity to put that in as well. Once you've finished, come back to the chat, put a yes to say that you've finished, and you can also whack any questions that you have that come up on the way in the chat, or just unmute yourself and ask me. So click on that link and we'll see you in a couple of minutes. Alrighty, it looks like most people are finishing up now. We are about to go on a break, so if you haven't finished, that's okay. No worries at all. So it is 11:44 by my clock, and we're about to break for an hour. So if everyone could be back here at 11:44 to start at 11:45, that would be fantastic. We are going to go almost immediately back into our breakout rooms, and we're going to do quite a in-depth activity. So if everyone can make sure they've got paper and pens with them and are well rested and ready to go, check your emails, go for a walk, grab something to eat, have a cup of tea, whatever you like. I believe, Zoe, can you unmute yourself and just
Yes.
to me, do I need to move everyone to a waiting room so that?
Yeah, so if everybody just puts themselves on mute and switches their camera off, we'll just move you into the waiting room, and then at 11:44 we'll bring you back in. But don't worry about that, just put your camera on mute and put your camera off and on mute, and then we will see you back here at 11:45.
That sounds fantastic. Thanks everyone, we'll see you in an hour.